here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
Into the World Trade Center in New York.
We're trying to reconcile how Benghazi was not safe enough for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to go, but it was safe enough to leave a below-spec facility for our diplomats to stay in.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the blow-be-eating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon.
I opted for convenience to use my personal
Belly
email
up to the bar, we've kept your seat and it's great to see you back.
by the State Department.
Blaine is going to be your bartender tonight. He pours with the best of them, and the lava lamp is in fact lighted once again religiously. My left, your right, if you're on YouTube. By the way, you can watch live right now on the SHR Media channel on YouTube. Right now, go there, quick like a bunny, you can watch it live. Or you can go to shrmedia.com, click on Listen Live, and you'll hear it live, and you can interact in chat. And we have one viewer, and Mike is already here in chat, so welcome to the two of you. Mike reminds me, of course, that you better not sit in Mary Brockman's chair. That's the one with a name embroidered on the back. You know what we don't do? We don't water our drinks here, just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the Saloon. Why? 'Cause nothing's sacred. The speech is free, but the booze isn't. All that we ask is you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, tip your waitress.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Well, that would certainly be true, isn't it? Now, normally at this time, today is Thursday, by the way, it's the aftermath on BZ's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon, a radio show, live and direct, behind enemy lines in occupied Fornicalia. Some people call it California, I call it Fornicalia, because it fornicates everything with which it essentially comes in touch. Now, if you were listening last night to the Sackheads radio show, you heard a ridiculous theme that's going on. Sacramento, the city of Sacramento, capital of the state of Fornicalia, has decided in its infinite wisdom that it's going to pay criminals not to commit crimes. What a wonderful idea that is. Wow. That's an idea whose time has come. And also customarily on a Thursday, by the way, today is Thursday, the year of our, August, oh my God, it's the end of the month already. Where did all the rest of that stuff go? August 31st, the year of our Lord 2017. It was 100 degrees today. In Sacramento, it's going to be 110 tomorrow. And it's going to be 110 Saturday. And it's going to be 109 Sunday. So it's going to be a little roasty toasty in Sacramento. Despite that, I am here tonight because I can't wait. And I said in a few intros that I'm going to cork off tonight. Yeah, I am, but I'm going to do it at another... I kind of started doing it on Tuesday with Antifa and a Berkeley response, but I'm going to even broaden it some more, particularly in light of some of the things that have been occurring recently on the law enforcement side and also on the federal government side with regard to law enforcement. Because it's Thursday, we would ordinarily have the underground professor, Dr. Michael Jones, in to speak about constitutional issues, but just like Dan Butcher of High Plains Pundit Media, and by the way, we are being broadcast also on High Plains Pundit Media, if you happen to be on that side as well. Thanks again, Dan Butcher, for doing that in the simulcast. Greatly appreciated. Mary Brockman, welcome to chat. Good to see you, madame. But the underground professor will not be here. Just like Dan Butcher, they both reside in Texas. They're having their issues right now with Hurricane Harvey. Apparently, I don't know precisely where the underground professor lives, but we message back and forth to each other. He's saying that gasoline is becoming quite an issue and trying to find food and fuel. And that's particularly in light of the fact that a lot of these folks were not in the direct path, but everybody's going to be suffering in some fashion from this. Today in Texas, there was an explosion at a chemical plant because the refrigeration needed to keep certain chemicals in that particular plant safe and neutral. The refrigeration went off. The chemicals couldn't withstand the heat, and they exploded. And it looks as though one of the refineries in Texas is going to be down for about 2 weeks. I should think that you're going to be experiencing a little bit of pain nationwide because of this. Those people who don't realize the bulk of the refinery capacity in the United States of America is down in Texas, in the Gulf, right on the water so it can be transported. And what's right next to the water? Hurricanes, etc. That's where all the refineries, the bulk of the refinery processing power in the United States lives, because you have to be near a port for shipping and export. Only makes sense. A lot of people couldn't understand this concept as well. Gosh, why did we have to build the Keystone XL pipeline? And why did it have to go through so many states? And why did it ultimately have to point towards Texas? Well, as you well know, the Keystone XL pipeline was approved. What you may not know is that many sections, many miles of a pipeline were already in place. The Keystone XL pipeline plan was to connect everything up in a north to south fashion from Alberta, because Alberta is the processing powerhouse of Canada, and ship the oil. By the way, Canada is I think Canada is the #2 exporter of oil to the United States. It fluctuates back and forth between Mexico and Canada. And after that was Venezuela for a time. And after that was Saudi Arabia. Everyone thinks that the Middle East is the greatest supplier of petroleum to the United States. Wrong. These days it's wrong. OPEC does not have the stranglehold that it normally would, because we're becoming energy independent, as we should. Anyway, the Keystone XL pipeline being built and going south is specifically so it could be linked up to all the refineries, the bulk of the refineries that are in Texas, on the coast, so that we could by the way, do you know what our #1 export is? Our #1 export in the United States? Right. Refined petroleum. Gasoline. Where does that come from? All the refineries that are impacted by hurricanes. We don't particularly have a choice in this. People would say, oh, why don't we just locate all that stuff in the middle of the United States? Well, then it would be subject to tornadoes, etc. And you'd be quite a distance away from the ports required to pick up the oil and to pick up the refined petroleum products for distribution across the rest of the world. That's a long way of saying that the underground professor is not going to be here tonight. I have a lot of things to say. I have 20 tabs open right now in the Confuser that's over here. Thank God that's working these days. The Sackheads were off for a time last night, and it was about maybe a half hour till the end of the show. It turns out it was because a wire was slightly unplugged. So Sean backtracked that wire, and now everything is working just fine. What I wanted to do tonight, and I only do this when I find things that I wish that I had written but hadn't, I receive a publication called Imprimis. It's from Hillsdale College. You can get it for free. You can subscribe. Mary Brockman says no place is 100% safe. You're absolutely right. Anyway, there's an article written by Kimberly Strassel. And she's the author of a book called The Intimidation Game, How the Left is Silencing Free Speech. And she herself gave a speech at Hillsdale College, and it's been reprinted in Imprimis. The speech was called The Left's War on Free Speech. And it goes like this, because she makes all the points that I want to make about free speech. And I'm going to wrap it up with a Pastor Niemoller quote, if you're familiar with him. But we're going to go through this first because I could not have written this. And rather than trying to rewrite what she so wonderfully wrote herself, I'm just going to read this article because it nails every point that I would have wanted to make. She writes, I like to introduce the topic of free speech with an anecdote about my children. I have 3 kids, ages 12, 9, and 5. They're your average normal kids, which means they live to annoy the heck out of each other. Last fall, sitting around the dinner table, the 12-year-old was doing a particularly good job with his younger brother. She finally, the sister rather, finally grew so frustrated that she said, Oliver, you need to stop talking forever. Yeah, that sounds like brothers and sisters. This inspired a volley of protests about free speech rights and ended with them yelling, shut up at each other. Desperate to stop the fighting and restored order, I asked each of them in turn to tell me what they thought free speech meant. The 12-year-old went first. A serious and academic child, he gave a textbook definition that included Congress shall make no law, an evocation of James Madison, a tutorial on the Bill of Rights, and warnings about certain exceptions for public safety and libel. Well, that's pretty amazing coming out of a 12-year-old. I was happy to know that private school fees were yielding something. I would agree. The 9-year-old went next. A rebel convinced that everyone ignores her. She said she had no idea what public safety or libel were, but that, quote, it doesn't matter because free speech means there should never be any restrictions on anything that anybody says, anytime or anywhere. She added that we could all start by listening more to what she says. Perfect. Then it was the 5-year-old's turn. You could tell she'd been thinking hard about her answer. She fixed both her brother and sister with a ferocious stare and said, free speech is that you can say what you want as long as I like it. It was at that moment that I had one of those sudden insights as a parent. I realized that my oldest was a constitutional conservative, my middle child was a libertarian, and my youngest a socialist with totalitarian tendencies. With that introduction, my main point today in her speech, as she's giving it to Hillsdale College, is that we've experienced over the past 8 years a profound shift in our political culture, a shift that has resulted in a significant portion of our body politic holding a 5-year-old's view of free speech. What makes this shift notable is that unlike most other changes in politics, you can trace it back to one day, January 21st, 2010, the day the Supreme Court issued the Citizens United ruling and restored free speech rights to millions of Americans. I'd never thought about that, but I have to say Kimberly Strassel makes an excellent point on that, because that's when the bulk of pushback started on the left. For nearly 100 years up to that point, both sides of the political aisle had used campaign finance laws, I call them speech laws, to muzzle their political opponents. The right used them to push unions out of elections. The left used them to push corporations out of elections. These speech laws kept building and building until we got the Mac Daddy of them all, McCain-Feingold. It was at this point the Supreme Court said, hey, enough! A 5-judge majority ruled that Congress had gone way too far in violating the Constitution's free speech protections. Stop. 5-4. 5-4 on SCOTUS. Holding our rights was that narrow a margin. That should be of great concern to everyone, and again goes back to buttress my point of whoever controls SCOTUS controls the nation, along with education. Whoever controls SCOTUS and education, in their own fashion, will control the United States of America. The Citizens United ruling was viewed as a blow for freedom by most on the right, which had in recent times gotten some free speech religion, but as an unmitigated disaster by the left. Over the decades, the left had found it harder and harder to win policy arguments. In other words, facts. They were starting to run out of facts, folks. And they'd come to rely more and more on these laws to muzzle political opponents. And here was the Supreme Court knocking back those laws, reopening the floodgates for nonprofits and corporations to speak freely again in the public arena. Well, in the left's view, the ruling couldn't have come at a worse time. Now, remember the political environment in 2010. Democrats were experiencing an enormous backlash against the policies and agenda of the Obama administration. There were revolts over auto bailouts, stimulus spending, and Obamacare. The Tea Party movement back then was in full swing and vowing to use the midterm elections to effect dramatic change. Democrats feared an electoral tidal wave would sweep them out of Congress. In the weeks following the Citizens United ruling, the left settled on a new strategy. If it could no longer use speech laws against its opponents, it would do the next best thing. It would threaten, harass, and intimidate its opponents out of participation. It would send a message, conservatives choosing to exercise their constitutional rights, you're going to pay a political and a personal price. And they did. Kimberly Strassel goes on to write, we've seen this strategy unfold in a coordinated fashion and using a variety of tactics since 2010. One tactic is the unleashing of federal and state bureaucracies on political opponents. The best example of that is the IRS's targeting of conservative nonprofits. To this day, Obama acolytes and Senate Democrats characterize their targeting as a mistake by a few minor IRS employees in Cincinnati who didn't understand the law. It's a mistake. She writes, that's a lie. Congress held several investigations of this targeting, and the truth is clear. In the months following the Citizens United ruling, President Obama delivered speech after speech on behalf of Democrats, midterm candidates repeating the same grave warning at each stop. Thanks to Citizens United, he would say, shadowy and scary organizations are flooding into your elections. He suggested those organizations might be operating illegally and might be funded by foreign players. Do not note the delicious irony in here, considering the Clinton Foundation. These are my comments. He noted that somebody should be doing something about it. Those speeches acted as a dog whistle to an IRS bureaucracy that was already primed to act. Further IRS official, or former IRS official, Lois Lerner, was well aware of Democrat demands that the agency go after conservative Tea Party and nonprofit groups. Senate Democrats and left-wing interest groups had been sending letters to the agency for months, demanding that it go after the very groups it ultimately went after. And Ms. Lerner had her own biases. We know this from her recoverable emails. Again, another reason why emails are so critically important. Oh, hold on to that thought for just a few minutes later with an FBI decision recently that I'm going to tell you about. Ms. Lerner had her own biases. We know that from her recoverable emails that put her politically and substantially in the anti-free speech camp. The result is that the IRS deliberately put some 400 conservative organizations representing tens of thousands of Americans on political ice for the 2010 and 2011 elections. And again, cogitate on that. Think of what would happen in reverse had the Republicans or a big person at the IRS who was known to donate to Republicans had done something similar. It's hard not to believe that this was designed to help Democrats in those elections. We know that senior members of the Treasury Department were aware of the targeting abuse early in 2012 and took steps to try to slow it. Yet those officials did not inform Congress this was happening and chose not to divulge the abuse until well after that year's elections. Coinkydink? I don't really think so. Another intimidation tactic is for prosecutors to abuse their awesome powers in order to hound and frighten political opponents. The most terrifying example of this was the John Doe probe in Wisconsin. Democrat prosecutors in Milwaukee launched a bogus criminal campaign finance investigation into some 30 conservative groups that supported the public sector union reforms championed by Governor Scott Walker. Wisconsin's John Doe law gave those prosecutors the right to conduct this investigation in secret and to subject their substantial targets to gag orders. Prosecutors secretly looked through the individual's financial records, bank accounts, and emails. And remember, again, because of that law, this was conducted in secret. How good to know. Prosecutors also conducted pre-dawn raids on some of their targets' homes. In one horrifying instance, the target of such a raid was on an out-of-town trip with his wife, and their teenage son was home alone. Law enforcement came into the house and sequestered the boy, refusing to allow him to call a lawyer or even his grandparents, who lived down the road. They hauled items out of the house, and as they left, they told the boy that he, too, was subject to the gag order, that if he told anyone what had happened, he would go to jail. We only learned of this because one brave target of the probe, Eric O'Keefe, told the Wall Street Journal what was going on. We broke that story and it became national headline news, but ultimately took a lawsuit and the Wisconsin Supreme Court to shut down the probe. In its ruling, the court made clear its view that the probe's purpose had been intimidation. The prosecutors had been sending the message, if you dare to speak, we will turn your lives into a living hell and potentially put you in prison. More recently, we've seen this tactic in the joint action of 17 state attorneys general who launched a probe into Exxon and some 100 different groups that have worked with Exxon over the years. The implicit prosecutorial threat, get on board with our climate change agenda, or we might bring racketeering charges against you. Again, who heard of this? Who remembers this? She does, and I do. A third intimidation tactic is for activist groups to use blackmail against corporations and nonprofits in order to silence them. One subject of the attack was the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, a group that works to promote free market policies at the state level. As a nonprofit, it's largely funded by corporate donations. Because it's so successful, it has been long despised by left-wing activist groups. Imagine that. These groups focused their effort on Alec in 2012 in the wake of the tragic shooting of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in Florida. Alec had played a tangential role in crafting the popular Stand Your Ground laws that the left attacked after the shooting. On that basis, left-wing activists branded Alec a racist organization and threatened to run ad campaigns against its corporate donors, branding them as racists too, unless they stopped shipping funding to Alec. In a coordinated action, Democrat U.S. Senator Dick Durbin sent letters to 1,000 organizations across the country demanding to know if they supported Alec and suggested they'd get hauled in front of Congress if they did. ALEC lost nearly half of its donors in the space of a few months. Anybody think of a word for this besides me? Yes, that would be intimidation. Federal government intimidation by the left. We've also seen this tactic employed against private individuals. This is the biggest umbrage I have. One such person was Idaho businessman Frank Vandershoot, who Barack Obama's re-election campaign singled out in 2012, following a Vandersloot donation to Mitt Romney. The campaign publicly branded him a disreputable person, painting a target on his back. Not long after that, Vandersloot was audited by the IRS and visited by other federal agencies. Imagine that. Thank you, Mr. Obama. Tacit condemnation and overt condemnation. Out in California, left-wing activists targeted donors to the state's Proposition 8 ballot initiative, which supported traditional marriage. By the way, that passed with a with a majority of voters, myself included. They combed through campaign finance records and put the names and addresses of Prop 8's donors on a searchable map. Citizens on this list had their cars keyed, their windows broken, their small businesses flash mobbed, and their voicemails and emails flooded with threats and insults. Some of them even lost their jobs, most notably Brendan Eich, the founder and CEO of Mozilla. In later depositions, many of those targets told lawyers that they wouldn't donate to future ballot initiatives. So guess what? The attacks were absolutely successful in silencing people. Note the use of disclosure in these attacks. We've come to associate transparency and disclosure with good government. But uncomfortably, our system of disclosure has been, well, it's been turned on its head. Disclosure was supposed to enable citizens to keep track of politicians. But if you followed Hillary Clinton's server scandals, you know that politicians have now become expert at hiding their business. Instead, disclosure is increasingly becoming a tool by which government and political thugs identify people and organizations who oppose them. Sadly, our federal judiciary has refused to honor important precedents that protect anonymity in politics, most notably the famous 1958 case, NAACP versus Alabama. In that case, a unanimous Supreme Court ruled against the Alabama Attorney General, who had demanded a list of the state's NAACP members. The civil rights group knew that this was tantamount to making targets of its members in a state that was riven at the time with race-related violence. The court held that some level of anonymity is sometimes required to protect the rights of free speech and free assembly. The court expanded on this precedent until the Watergate scandal, when it too got caught up in the disclosure fad. Political privacy rights have been eroding ever since. I think, folks, that's a perfect time to take a break. I'm going to continue with this story when we come back. And then we're going to go into an arena where I excoriate essentially the very people with whom I was employed until just recently.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show, also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner, Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Mim from Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Join your friends from SHR Media at the beautiful Paris Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 19th through the 22nd for 3 amazing days of liberty-oriented discussion, investment advice, and the Anthem Film Festival. It's our big 10th anniversary, featuring keynote speaker William Shatner and Freedom Fest favorites, including Steve Forbes, Jim Rogers, Lee Edwards, David Boaz, Doug Casey, Dinesh D'Souza, John Stossel, Lisa Kennedy, Grover Norquist, Peter Schiff, and many more. Don't miss out. Register at freedomfest.com for $100 off the regular registration rate when you use the all-caps code SHR Media.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I'd like to welcome you back to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon radio show. That is me. I am Zep, one each. And we were reading an article. I was reading an article by Kimberly Strassel. And she's speaking about free speech and how it's being negated by those on the left. And those of us who are thinking creatures know that, well, yeah, that's absolutely true. So let me continue, if I may. What's to be done? For starters, we need to be aware that this is happening and that it's not random. The intimidation game is very real. It's the work of left-wing groups and politicians. It's coordinated and it is well honed. Many of the targets of intimidation, who I interviewed for my recent book, weren't aware of what was happening to them, and that allowed the intimidation to go on for too long. Awareness is a key. We need to think hard about ways to limit the powers of the administrative state to stop rogue agents at the IRS and other agencies from trampling on free speech rights. We can make great progress simply by cutting the size of federal and state bureaucracies. But beyond that, we need to conduct systematic reviews of agency powers and strip from unaccountable bureaucracies any discretion over the political activities of Americans. The IRS should be doing what it was created to do, making sure taxpayers fill out their forms correctly, period. Stop. We all know that there are 3 branches of government: the judicial, the executive, the legislative. I submit there are 4. Add to that the bureaucratic. That's where the deep state comes in. When people talk about the deep state, what they're referring to are the people that are in various agencies and bureaucracies that are not in positions of such power that they are subject to appointment and removal rapidly, and they change administrations. No, these are people who have an agenda, and they're ensconced like ticks, and they have civil rights. They have union rules, so they cannot be arbitrarily fired for doing this easily. We need to push corporations to grow backbones and to defend more aggressively their free speech interests rather than leaving that defense to others. We need to overhaul our disclosure laws and once again put the onus of disclosure on government rather than citizens. At the moment, every American who donates $200 or more to a federal politician goes into a database. Were you aware of that? Do you make donations? Then somebody's got your name and your money, as well as information about you. Without meaning to sound cynical, no politician in Washington is capable of being bought off for a mere $200. We need to raise that donation threshold, and we need to think hard about whether there is good reason to force disclosure of any donation to ballot initiatives or to the production and broadcast of issue ads designed to educate the public rather than promote or oppose candidates. Most important, we need to call out intimidation in any form and manner we see it, and to do it instantly. Bullies don't like to be exposed. They'd rather practice their ugliness in the dark. And one lesson that emerged from all of my interviews on this topic for the book is that speaking out works. Those who rolled over merely set themselves up for future attacks. Wait, isn't that what bullies do? Which is exactly what leftists hate educators on the left. They hate bullies. Well, that's the definition right there. Finally, conservatives need to tamp down any impulse to practice such intimidation themselves. Our country is best when it is engaging in vigorous debate. The framers of the Constitution envisioned a multiplicity of interests that would argue their way to a common good. We succeed with more voices, with more views, not fewer. And we should have enough confidence in our arguments to hear out our opponents. Now, does that sound like anybody on the left to you? It certainly doesn't to me. That was a speech by Kimberly Strassel at Hillsdale College, and I received that through Imprimis. You can sign up at Hillsdale College. You can get Imprimis for free. Comes in your mailbox once a month, and it's got lots and lots of things. Excellent topics on that. Now, we were talking about the federal government, were we not? We were talking about the federal government being politicized. That's essentially what I'm talking about all night. The politicization of everyone and everything, particularly groups and interests and agencies that not only should not, but operate worse when they are. And here's more evidence. Here's an article. A headline says, James Comey, former FBI Director James Comey, who was fired rightly and properly so by President Donald Trump, began drafting exoneration statement before interviewing Hillary Clinton, senators say. I read that and I thought, oh no, this is wrong. This can't be true. Are you serious? This is from some rogue little fourth world country, an idea like that. It can't occur.
Comey handled the Clinton email investigation. And that's not all they want. A bit earlier, I talked with a committee member, Jim Jordan, and he was pretty fired up about this. Watch. Seems to me you're painting a pretty broad brush. Loretta Lynch, James Comey, Hillary Clinton email.
Yeah,
what do you want?
Well, we want the facts. The American people want the facts. And we want to know why in the world would the Attorney General of the United States bill tell the FBI Director of the United States, go tell the American people something that's not true. Remember, she said, go call it a matter, not an investigation. As I said in committee yesterday, last time I checked, he wasn't director of the Federal Bureau of Matters. He's the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
We all heard this. We all know about this.
And so when you have the Justice Department intentionally, willfully misleading the American people, that warrants examination. That's why we're calling for a special counsel.
Okay, that's a big deal now. Let me get to that in a moment. Is this any part of a reaction what the president's been talking about? You know, he tweets about matters like these.
Well, no, this is about getting the truth. This is about what the constituents in the 4th District of Ohio are talking to me about. This is about just looking at the rule of law and equal treatment under the law. How in the world does someone like Secretary Clinton get away with something that no other person in the country get away with, right?
I know how. And you do too. This article continues, and I just played that just to remind you of some of the things that were occurring prior to that. But here's what the article says. Then FBI Director James Comey began drafting a statement exonerating Hillary Clinton in the investigation into a private email use before interviewing key witnesses, including Hillary Clinton herself. Two Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee said Thursday. Today. Conclusion first, fact-gathering second. That's no way to run an investigation, Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham wrote in a letter this week to the FBI. Be still, my quaking heart. Thank you, Lindsey Graham, for that. The FBI should be held to a higher standard than that, especially in a matter of such great public interest and controversy, to which BZ replies, no shit, Sherlock. Grassley and Graham said they learned about Comey's draft exoneration statement after reviewing transcripts of interviews with top Comey aides. It's just now getting out. Quote, according to the unredacted portions of the transcripts, it appears that in April or early May of 2016, Mr. Comey had already decided he would issue a statement exonerating Secretary Clinton, the senators said. But no, there's no fix, and the FBI is not politicized in any way. Just ask them. They added, that was long before FBI agents finished their work. Mr. Comey even circulated an early draft statement to select members of senior FBI leadership. Note that, please. Senior FBI leadership. The outcome of an investigation should not be prejudged while FBI agents are still hard at work trying to gather the facts. Again, no shit, Sherlock. Clinton, the Demo-rat, presidential nominee in 2016, was investigated by the FBI for using a private email address and server to handle classified information while serving as Secretary of State. In July of 2016, Comey famously called Clinton's email arrangement, quote, extremely careless, though he decided against recommending criminal charges. Stop. In the law enforcement system, whose job is it to press charges? That's right, it's locally the district attorney. In the federal system, it's the attorney general. So James Comey decided that it was his job to circumvent the attorney general of the United States. Also this, the statement preceded the FBI entering into an immunity agreement with top Clinton aides with Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson. This little tidbit at the end. It is unclear whether the FBI agents actually investigating the case were aware that Mr. Comey had already decided on the investigator's outcome while the work was ongoing. Okay, that's one aspect. Let's talk about the FBI again, shall we? Because this came out today from TruePundit.com. The headline, FBI investigation of espionage blackmail charges in Awan case blocked by Obama DOJ appointee who worked for Holder and Lynch. Hello, deep state. Hello, fourth branch of government. Federal agents believe the Justice Department is meddling in the FBI's efforts to expand the Imran Awan and Hina Alvi investigation in what appears to be a blatant attempt to shield Democrat members of Congress entangled in the burgeoning criminal case. Remember, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. Does that maybe sound like a bit of a distraction to you? That's because the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Channing Phillips, who is running point on the case, is likewise a Democrat appointed by President Barack Obama. Phillips was appointed just months before the grand jury convened to weigh evidence in the Awan case. FBI agents feel they've amassed crucial evidence to expand the Awan case into a wider investigation of possible espionage and blackmail, but the Bureau was getting pushback from the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., federal sources revealed and confirmed. Are you shocked? Are you shocked that your DOJ is politically compromised? Are you shocked that your FBI is politically compromised? I could go on with this, but for me, the rest of it is just detail. An interesting point occurred recently, however. Today, as a matter of fact. that I should like to point out, which at first blush seems not so good, but I submit to you it could be pretty good. This is a headline from Fox News. You may or may not have heard that Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark resigned today. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, one of the highest profile members of the law enforcement, or of any law enforcement, to emerge as a vocal supporter of President Trump, resigned from his position on Thursday. County Clerk George Christensen said he received a resignation letter from Clark, but that no reason for the move was provided. Clark issued a retirement statement to local media hours after this resignation was announced, and it wrote, "After almost 40 years pursuing and serving the great people of Milwaukee County, I've chosen to retire to go after other opportunities. I will have news about my next steps in the very near future." I submit they're going to be political, and I cannot wait. So I've been leading up to this point. This is the second segment. It's pushing the 9 o'clock, the witching hour, 12 o'clock on the East Coast. Thanks, folks, that are still listening to me and listening on podcast and are in chat right now. By the way, Dan Butcher, welcome to chat. Mike is still in chat. Mary Brockman, and 2 viewers are in chat. Dan, great to see you there in chat. But this is leading to the point that I want to make, because more and more it's been building specifically to this. Last Tuesday, I took a certain police department to task for its politicization. How it's become so political, I truly have no idea how the officers on that department really operate efficiently anymore. And I'm going to make some suggestions. Some very dire suggestions that people, folks who know me, I retired about 1.5 years ago after 41 years in law enforcement. I did, in fact, work for the FBI. I worked for the U.S. Marshals. I worked for a coastal California Sheriff's Department. And I retired from a 2,000-plus member department whose agency lost a deputy who was killed yesterday, one of the people that I happened to supervise at one point in my career, Bob French. So this hits home to me. This is very personal to me. This isn't just something that, like water off a duck's back. And so the things that I'm going to tell you, I take extremely seriously. But it's gotten to the point where I have to recommend very serious options because I see no other way to go about it. I think it's an idea about leftist law enforcement entities whose time has finally come. And that's this. It's time for suits and prosecutions. Make them general and then make them very specific. It's time to name departments, then name very specific individuals. You need to start at the top and work your way down. You know the drill. Make deals for bigger fish. Offer immunities for testimony, leverage, force, immunity, end goal in mind. And I wrote this, and I spoke about this last Tuesday. In my opinion, I would submit that the city of Berkeley, Mayor Araguin, the city council, and Chief Andrew Greenwood are all complicit in a conspiracy, that's 182 PC of the California Penal Code, to allow lawful citizens of the state of California and the United States to become injured by indifference, and to allow private and public property to be damaged and destroyed, having received their marching orders not to interfere if the forces of Antifa were having their way. I would submit that these forces possess a history sufficient to instigate both a federal RICO investigation, because RICO, racketeer, influenced, corrupt organizations, oh, I could make an excellent argument for that, of the entire Bay Area, just to start, and its bureaucracy, and also a 42 U.S.C. 1983 action, which is a deprivation of civil rights. It's like this. This is what it reads, and you tell me if you think it applies, because I do. Every person who, under color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state or territory or in the District of Columbia, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws shall be liable. When the police departments step away, in my opinion, they have become subject to suit when they are not doing the jobs that they were tasked to do. And then I came across this little segment, and this is from Tucker Carlson's show. And you know me and Tucker Carlson. I like to play stuff that regards him, and frequently he is so spot on, but it's very interesting. They're first talking about Antifa, and then Laura Ingraham comes in with
Evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight.
Very,
the city of Houston
very
is still coping
interesting
with massive
solution.
flooding at this hour in the aftermath of Hurricane
Similar
Harvey. It's awful.
to mine.
Waters are finally receding a bit, though. More than 20 have been confirmed killed so far. Today, rescue missions throughout the state saved many people from flooded neighborhoods. A nursing home was also finally evacuated from floodwaters. We'll bring you updates throughout the hour. Meanwhile, America is waking up to the menace of Antifa.
Murray Brockman in chat said, hey, isn't Clark going to run for Senate? That could be true. I don't have my finger on the pulse of that, but that could eminently be true. And quite frankly, I would like to see it.
The left-wing agitators who fight against oppression by violently oppressing those who oppose them. This past weekend, they got violent in Berkeley, California, and assaulted a whole bunch of people. After that, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi had no choice but to admit they are out of control and issued a statement sort of condemning them. One of the people attacked by this group in Berkeley this past weekend.
Oh, wait, did you see Paul Ryan make a major statement that everyone covered condemning Antifa with a joint, a big conglomerate of GOP people behind him, 15, 20, 30 Republicans in massive group agreement saying, yes, Antifa must be condemned, completely condemned.
And was it?
No, you didn't see that.
Trump supporter called Keith Campbell. Watch this.
Basically, what you can't see is that he's getting his arse kicked, clearly, by people in the video. He can't get up. It's one individual against multiple members of Antifa. And it just continues. And it's on video. Everyone can see it. Everyone can see what Antifa is doing. And they're jocular. They're happy. It's a joyous day that they get to injure people.
Keith Campbell joins us tonight. Keith, you look like you were about to get really hurt, maybe killed. What was the predicate to that? What happened right before the tape we just played?
Well, I had gone to the park to see what was going on. I know there was a canceled Say No to Marxism show up. So I wanted to go and observe what was going on, record what was going on. I think most people figured that Antifa would be there. And it was no surprise when they showed up. Earlier in the day, there was no problem. People were giving interviews. There was a heavy police presence both around the barricaded park and throughout the park, and there was no issue. But strangely enough, we weren't allowed to have any protective gear, helmets or anything. They let about 200.
Okay, notice two things. Antifa, in every video you've seen, is geared up almost like the cops. They were not allowed to do so. Also notice another thing. There was a massive police presence. There was no need to intervene because basically Antifa hadn't showed up yet. Keep that in mind.
100 Antifa with masks just come right through one of the openings and start mixing with Trump supporters. And they immediately started ejecting Trump supporters. They would find someone and...
They went through the opening. The opening of what? The opening of the police cordon, the City of Berkeley Police Department. That opening.
Surround them and usher them out. But at that point, they weren't really attacking people because the police were there. But I couldn't believe that the police were actually letting them there.
I mean, how did the beating... Well, first of all, are you injured? I mean, I can't imagine...
I can't believe the police let them through.
I can't believe you got out of there. What are your injuries like?
Yeah, you know, I'm like bruised ribs, bruised kidney. It wasn't torn. They did, sonogram thing just to make sure it wasn't torn. I got about 4 or 5 lumps on the back of my head.
He had to go get a sonogram to have himself checked out. Oh, at his expense, too. Great.
Scrapes, bruises, swelling, things like that. Nothing that won't heal.
Did these guys start hitting you without warning? How did the beating begin?
Well, after the massive part of the black bloc came, the police disappeared, and then there was an announcement.
The police disappeared after the black bloc came. One of the multiple reasons I want to bring this to your attention.
The police have stood down, and then like a sea of black just like poured into the park, and then it started getting violent. So after a few minutes,
And this was entirely unforeseeable, wasn't it? I mean, as a cop, as a department administrator, as the local sergeants, the local watch commanders, they couldn't see that that could possibly be the result of indifference.
I'm still filming.
Could they now? Oh, come on.
Still around them, and I noticed like a whole bunch of them go down Alston Way. So I go down there to see, okay, what's going on? They're following someone or something. So I went down there, and I'm filming, and then suddenly I hear someone go,
Mamba, White Mamba, welcome to chat. Good to see you.
There's that racist blank blank that's doxing you and ruining your lives. And I started to turn. I thought, okay, I got to get out of here. I'm surrounded by Antifa. And I took maybe one step, and the first club smash knocked my camera and monopod out of my hand. And I thought, I'm just going to grab it and run. So I started to reach, and then they just started pounding me over the head. And
so you didn't say anything?
I could make an excellent argument, and I would have had I been there, for 211 PC. That's robbery. I could make an excellent argument for armed robbery, which is a very, well, perhaps used to be a very serious felony in the state of California. I would have salivated at having my troops making an arrest similar to that. That would have been gorgeous.
To them?
Berkeley PD? No.
No. I'm always like a silent observer. For like 7 months, I go around, I observe, I record, and I just couldn't believe it. I was just shocked, and after the first few hits, I was stunned and dropped to the ground.
Well, there's this amazing moment. I don't know if our viewers watched it, but there's an African-American guy standing there in a red shirt. He's a lefty journalist, actually, named Al Letson. Mm-hmm. And he said later he thought you were going to get killed, and he dove on you and put his hands up, and people stopped hitting. Have you talked to him?
I reached out to him on Twitter, and I definitely want to connect with him. I didn't know at the time that he had stopped it. I have very little recollection of what happened. I was sure I was going to die. I kind of made my peace. Yeah. And I hope it's quick, because this is really painful.
He was sure you were going to die too.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it when they let me up. And
this is America, folks. This is America.
And I thought they were standing me up to finish the job or something to really get at me. And it's unbelievable that that man who doesn't know me and probably thought that I could be.
Mary Brockman in chat asks a very good, very cogent, logical question. Are the people on campus there police, or are they security guards? Well, it bled back from 2 areas. It never really went onto campus, but I'm going to answer your question anyway. At Berkeley, it's part of the UC system, the University of California system. They don't have security guards. They have actual police, issued handguns, weapons, etc. It's operated and authorized by an actual chief who's paid a chief wage, and it has a militaristic type hierarchy, chief, deputy chief, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, and officers. So no, they're not security guards. They're actual paid police officers. The city of Berkeley, same thing. Obviously, they're peace officers.
Maybe an enemy. I mean, I don't know. People assume I'm all right, which is completely crazy, but he dove in rather than standing back and doing the journalistic thing. I mean, he saved my life.
Well, God bless him.
Incredible.
God bless him.
Props to that guy. Massive props to that guy, because unimpeded, who really knows what would have happened to that particular individual, who was wearing, by the way, how horrible, he was wearing a shirt with the American flag on it.
For doing that. Really quickly, you said you spent 7 months following Antifa around. Who are these people exactly, and what do they want, to the extent you can tell?
You know, they think they're the anti-fascists, and so then everyone else that they don't like or they disagree with is a fascist, and Trump supporters are all, you know, they used to be...
Stop. That's true. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. It's, if you are not in complete lockstep with what we say and do, you are the enemy. And we're going to hurt you. And we're going to destroy property. Luckily, we haven't killed anyone yet.
Trump supporters are, you know, white nationalists or alt-right. Now it's like graduated to anyone who supports Trump as a Nazi or a neo-Nazi, regardless of your skin color, and they believe that we've committed the first crime. We've committed the first crime by being a Nazi, so it's self-defense, and they don't believe it's even a crime to attack us, even unarmed. And that's what's been happening.
Doesn't look like America to me. Keith, congratulations on surviving that. I hope you hook up with Al Letson, and thanks for doing the show.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
Laura Ingraham is a radio show host, the editor-in-chief of LifeSet.com. She's been thinking a lot about this subject, and she joins us tonight. You had, I thought, one of the smartest suggestions. Why not classify Antifa as a terrorist group?
That's number one. That's just a good start. But wait, listen to what she has to say. Does it sound similar to something you heard recently and perhaps last Tuesday?
Well, they are. I mean, sadly, that is America today. We've had official after official ignore this. This has been going on for a long time with Antifa.
Yes.
Antifa. They've been terrorizing people, intimidating people, and when they can get away with it, violently attacking people.
Let's hold that thought. We're going to come right back. I missed the break just a little bit, and I'm going to have to do it again. Folks, give me about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and we'll be right back going into the last two segments of the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon here on the last day of August, August 31st, the year of our Lord 2017. Don't go away, please.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads radio show, also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Mim from Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Join your friends from SHR Media at the beautiful Paris Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 19th through the 22nd for 3 amazing days of liberty-oriented discussion, investment advice, and the Anthem Film Festival. It's our big 10th anniversary, featuring keynote speaker William Shatner and Freedom Fest favorites, including Steve Forbes, Jim Rogers, Lee Edwards, David Boaz, Doug Casey, Dinesh D'Souza, John Stossel, Lisa Kennedy, Grover Norquist, Peter Schiff, and many more. Don't miss out. Register at freedomfest.com for $100 off the regular registration rate when you use the all-caps code SHR Media.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's about 5 minutes after the witching hour of midnight on the East Coast. A few minutes after 9 o'clock on the left coast. In Bolivia, it's 17:29 and 103 seconds. I haven't said that for a while, have I? Oh, Bolivia. We're talking tonight about the First Amendment, how we're losing it. We're also talking about, in my opinion, how various bureaucracies, in particular law enforcement, is allowing that to happen. We were listening to Tucker Carlson, and he just now began speaking to Laura Ingraham, and she's going to have a very significant suggestion.
These are felons, and for them, this is, we hear about honor killings, usually in the Middle East. For them, this is honorable. I'm concerned we'll get to that point where to win the badge of honor in Antifa, you do actually have to kill someone. We saw what happened with that young woman in Charlottesville, and she was run over by, I guess a white supremacist. That death was horrific and reprehensible, and should be condemned by all.
Yes. What she's saying is, guess what? They're probably going to be more, and it'll probably be by way of the left.
Should be condemned with alacrity by all. Republicans, Democrats,
right.
Everyone. And I'm glad Nancy Pelosi, finally came out. She had to be shamed into it. I think if this network and a number of people on this network and a few others hadn't written about it, talked about it, reported on it.
On the other hand, I say, where is the GOP? Where has the GOP been in unanimity and making a massive statement about the condemnation of Antifa? Damn you for not doing that.
I'm not sure she really would have.
Of course, you wouldn't know what happened,
no.
Actually. One of the reasons I'm really hoping that someday my prayers are answered and the Republicans take over Congress is maybe they'll have hearings on this.
Yeah.
Because I think there very little we know really about Antifa.
And I mean, maybe they don't need a lot of money, but don't you get the sense that there's some individual or individuals who are centrally organizing this? They have
George Soros. Hello.
Yeah, but where's the Congress in that? I mean, this is happening. This is not Venezuela. This is happening in California.
You would never know. Like if you said this was happening in Venezuela, there was a riot. You would say, oh yeah, that looks like Venezuela. But no, this is the United States. This is where the free speech movement began.
Yes.
In the United States, we have police who are not doing their job. They're ostensibly are standing there with shields and helmets on. They're allowing Antifa to enter this park. They stood back and left when Antifa entered this space after the initial protest.
And I read to you and told you about an article where last Tuesday when I spoke to you about this, Chief Greenwood of the Berkeley Police Department said he pulled his people back. He admitted it.
Test was canceled and so forth. They said they worried that if they blocked Antifa, it would lead to real violence. Okay, well.
Well, what the fuck is that then? That's fake violence.
Something's not working out here. And there will be an individual who decides to bust through the qualified immunity that most police get for how they conduct themselves in the line of duty, and really go after these police departments.
Oh yeah.
And I think you could look for a conspiracy.
Thank you.
You could look for RICO.
Thank you.
You could bust through qualified immunity, which oftentimes they get, because there's a recklessness beyond negligence. There is a reckless disregard for human life.
Human life equals civil rights, which is why I say a 42 USC 1983 action against individuals' management of all of those departments that I just mentioned.
And the way this is being policed and covered. And, we have civil rights lawsuits. Harmeet Dillon is representing
we talked to her.
Phenomenal, representing the Google, engineer, but also representing an individual who was attacked during the campaign. In
San Jose.
In San Jose. And there was the violence.
Oh, yes, San Jose Police Department as well. You've got to go after those as well.
Violence there, but this is terroristic. This is fascistic. And this is shutting down speech and intimidating good people, prayerful people who were there to pray for peace for all sides.
I keep saying with wonder, this is America. This is not the America that I recognize. This is not the America that my parents would recognize. It sure as shite isn't the America that my grandparents would recognize. So let there be no mistake. Everybody knows that I served 41 years in law enforcement. I've been all sorts of places, here, there, everywhere. if there ever was an advocate for law enforcement, it's me. But I cannot conjure or tolerate law enforcement agencies or administrators or officers who abandon their oaths of office for convenience or political correctness or for fiscal safety. Somewhere at some time, somebody needs to make a fucking stand. Stands must occur. Courage needs to step up to the plate. Ethics need to step up to the plate, and points have to be made. Otherwise, frankly, what is the point? All is lost. I was lost. I was cast aside. First time I've ever really told anybody this story. I was told in no uncertain terms that as a sergeant, I should never take the test for lieutenant because I had not cooperated with a captain who later became a chief on the department, who wanted to circumvent ethics on behalf of a female recruit with whom he was copulating, and to whom he wished to afford training above and beyond that of every other recruit in the academy. I said no. I declined the extra training at my range. Further, as a sergeant, I consulted right after that conversation with my immediate lieutenant, who left me hanging in the breeze, in the political breeze, because he didn't want to become involved. Said it then, say it now. Fuck you. So, I retired as a sergeant. A lot of people kept saying, hey, why aren't you taking the test for lieutenant? Oh, I forgot this part. I was up on the 4th floor, which is the administrative floor one day, went into the bathroom because I went to another room, came out, went to the bathroom, and I found that particular chief, former captain, now chief, who again emphasized, hey, the test is on for lieutenant. You may as well not take it. You'll never make it. And he said this to my face. Zipped up, walked out of the bathroom. Many suggested and hoped that I would make captain, and beyond that just wasn't in the political cards. I knew where it was going. I took the test for lieutenant twice. Guess what happened? I didn't even place. No shock. So imagine my chagrin and dismay when various law enforcement officials want to circumvent standards, safety, rules, and regulations that otherwise I had to completely honor and obey. You can be ethical. You can do what needs to be done. You can honor your oath, despite whatever political outcomes may result. And yes, there's every likelihood that in law enforcement, you're going to suffer consequences. I know how it goes. It's political. As in Berkeley. You officers, you sergeants, you lieutenants, watch commander, and mostly your administration, you have dishonored your oaths, Berkeley. You stood by while people were injured. You weren't simply not proactive. You weren't even interested in being reactive for a time. There have already been 4 Antifa riots at Berkeley this year. So I asked, where were the sergeants? First-line supervisors. I'm not telling any secrets here. To some it may be a revelation. First-line supervisors, that is to say, sergeants can make or break any and every department for which they work. Why? Because they not only relay, but they are tasked with enforcing the policies and orders issued by their specific departments. The state where they reside, their oaths they took to support and defend the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, for those they supervise. There is such a thing as a good sergeant. And a good sergeant, and this particularly grates with me, obviously, because I was a sergeant in law enforcement. So I know how they work. I know their deep little dark secrets. And I know what's right, and I know what's wrong. A good sergeant is a person who looks out for his or her troops, values the troops, and knows full well that they get the job done. They enable the job to get done, not the chief or the sheriff. Chiefs and sheriffs, they come and go like bad toilet paper, flush down the political toilet of life. Where were the good sergeants working for Berkeley PD? Because trust me, in a similar circumstance, knowing people are getting hurt right in front of me, no matter what my cock-gobbling managers or first-line supervisors, my lieutenants or executive staff said, I would have intervened. How could you not? You took an oath. And guess what? My troops would have followed me. Once one element was committed, my element, that I was supervising, the others would have followed suit because someone took a stand and waded into the maelstrom, and that made it okay for others to do. That's all it takes. Sometimes all it takes is just one person to do the right thing. One good sergeant. You Berkeley sergeants, you could have made a difference. You were provided and have been provided numerous opportunities to prove your mettle and your honor. You know who you are, what you did or didn't do. Guess what? So do your troops. Berkeley, PD, apparently that's how you want to be remembered. We're coming closer to the bottom line. What is one of those aspects? Here's what's happening. Americans are left to fight it out on the streets of the United States as law enforcement officers are either forced or willingly allow violence to occur directly in front of their eyes. Is that what we want as a society? I submit, no, we don't. Chaos would ensue. But, oh, be sure, that's precisely what Antifa wants, as well as leftists and anarchists. Chaos. Don't doubt that for a moment. So that's why I say, gloves are off, fuck it. Let the lawsuits commence. Depose people. Work people. Threaten them with prosecution. Go for the big dogs. Work up, just like you do in any investigation. They should start with the San Jose Police Department, the Charlottesville Police Department, the Berkeley Police Department, and the UC Berkeley Police Department. I say, subpoena everything. Collect everything. There's more evidence on the internet than one can swing a dead cat at. Take it, collect it, collate it, organize it, list it, depose individuals, and soon you're going to have a lawsuit or even a series of lawsuits that, and I can only hope, put the proverbial leftist chilling effect upon each and every leftist law enforcement agency and entity and support bureaucracy in the nation. Make their dollars and budgets bleed. Make them hurt. Just like they allowed citizens that they took an oath to protect, just like they hurt. Shape up or get the fuck out of law enforcement. Go weave baskets. Go join Antifa itself. You're on notice, and you should be on notice. And then again, there's the FBI. The FBI. I still speak to people in the FBI because of the contacts that I made. And the FBI has now gone out of its way to prove that it can no longer be trusted. That for me is such an incredibly depressing statement to make. Because I used to work for him. Here's an article from the WashingtonTimes.com a few days ago. FBI says lack of public interest in Hillary emails justifies withholding documents. Hillary Clinton's case isn't interesting enough to the public to justify releasing FBI files on her, the Bureau said this week in rejecting an open records request by a lawyer seeking to have the former Secretary of State punished for perjury. Ty Clevenger has been trying to get Mrs. Clinton and her personal attorneys disbarred for the handling of the official emails during her time as Secretary of State. He's met with resistance among lawyers, and now his request for information from the FBI's files has been shot down. Shot down. Okay, shot down by whom? Right, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who should be investigating an issue such as this. But no. Now the FBI has no fidelity, no bravery, no integrity. And guess what? They had to fucking work at it. They had to work at that. Woohoo! They've succeeded. I almost don't know where to go. I shake my head in just sadness. This is so incredibly dispiriting for me and for law enforcement everywhere. The article goes on. This is a quote. You have not sufficiently demonstrated that the public's interest in disclosure outweighs personal privacy interests of the subject. FBI Records Management Section Chief David M. Hardy told Mr. Clevenger in a letter this past Monday. It is incumbent upon the requester to provide documentation regarding the public's interest in the operations and activities of the government before records can be processed pursuing to the FOIA. That's the Freedom of Information Act. So Clevenger made a FOIA request. Yeah, and so it's good to know that with all, that there isn't more of a clangor and a clamoring by the public sufficient to justify the withholding of facts and evidence. Facts and evidence. What do we know? We know this. Mrs. Clinton was the 2016 Democrat presidential nominee, former chief diplomat, former U.S. Senator, former First Lady of the U.S. in Arkansas. Her use of a secret email account to conduct government business while leading the State Department was front-page news for much of 2015 and 2016, and was so striking that the FBI director, then FBI director, broke with procedure and made both a public statement and appearances before Congress to talk about the Bureau's probe, which we now discover was predetermined before the investigation concluded. Woohoo! James Comey, FBI. Thank you. It was, oddly enough, under her watch, if you recall, that 4 Americans lost their lives. So that's not in public interest. That's not in the public interest at all. 4 lives cast aside. That doesn't count. Because if you mention that now, what is that? That's bias and prejudice against Hillary Clinton. Again, can you write this stuff? In the end, the FBI didn't recommend charges against Mrs. Clinton, concluding that while she risked national security, she was basically too technologically inept to know the dangers that she was running. So, oh well, we can't make a case against her. The FBI says it will only release records from its files if a subject consents. That's not going to fucking happen. Is dead, or is of such public interest that it overrides privacy concerns. For dead people, who cares? Protecting those elements from those who require protecting for the left, by the left, so that people continue to vote for the left. That's the basis for that FBI's politicized decision. Mr. Clevenger said he thought it would have been clear why Mrs. Clinton's case was of public interest, but he sent documentation anyway, pointing to a request by members of Congress for an investigation into whether Mrs. Clinton perjured herself in testimony to Capitol Hill. I'm just stunned. This is just exactly what I would have expected had Mrs. Clinton won the election. But she didn't. It looks like the Obama administration is still running the FBI. Mr. Clevenger told the Washington Times, "How can a story receive national news coverage and not be a matter of public interest? If this is the new standard, there's no such thing as public interest as a public interest exception." Correct. This is a biased decision expected from, say, a Hillary Clinton administrator, but she's not president. So this is another in a continuing series of revelations indicating that clearly the deep state is very alive, very well. The fourth branch of government, influencing every level and agency in D.C. You know, you were told at one point about the three levels, the three branches of government. And we know now that the bureaucratic branch of the government is frequently every bit as powerful and occasionally more so than the other three. That's just one instance that I just talked to you about right there. That guy Hardy is a bureaucrat. He's a paper shuffler. He wasn't elected. He took a test, probably, to get there. Therefore, he gets to stymie the investigation and hold back the information. Good on him. Just one basic question. Since when is whatever amount of interest shown by the public a deciding factor in the revelation of documents which are not in and of themselves classified and therefore subject to non-disclosure? Is the FBI saying that had there been a greater rumbling by the public that the agency would have looked more favorably upon Clevenger's request? Or is the FBI saying, by way of that guy Hardy, that he's solely making the determination, and he is, the information is not in the public's interest? Good to know. A perception of public interest is now a lawful criteria with which to determine the relevancy of a FOIA request. I suppose Hardy will expect future requests to have ginned up public support behind them prior to consideration. So damn that guy Clevenger for not getting the public's interest more ginned up. It's called a clue. Perhaps it's something you need to do in the future. Who knows? This is the same FBI whose former director, James Comey, in 2016, as I said, laid out a perfect case against Hillary Clinton, then decided he was not going to recommend an investigation, taking that decision out of the hands of then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. And this is the same FBI, and I want to tell you this again, you may have forgotten. This is the same FBI where former director James Comey, I like saying that, former director James Comey, decided there was no conflict of interest whatsoever with his second in command. I got about 2 minutes. I can make this point. We're going to go to a break. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, a longtime Clinton confidant, helped steer $675,000 to the election campaign of the wife of an FBI official who went on to lead the probe into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email system. The Political Action Committee of McAuliffe, the Clinton loyalist, gave $467,500 to the state Senate campaign of the wife of Andrew McCabe, who is and was, at that time, deputy director of the FBI. That's per the Wall Street Journal. The report states Jill McCabe, wife of the assistant FBI director, received an additional $207,788 from the Virginia Democrat Party, which is heavily influenced by McAuliffe. And James Comey, former FBI director, James Comey rightly concludes, obviously, that there's no conflict of interest there. There's no there.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show, also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Mim from Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Join your friends from SHR Media at the beautiful Paris Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 19th through the 22nd for 3 amazing days of liberty-oriented discussion, investment advice, and the Anthem Film Festival. It's our big 10th anniversary, featuring keynote speaker William Shatner and Freedom Fest favorites, including Steve Forbes, Jim Rogers, Lee Edwards, David Boaz, Doug Casey, Dinesh D'Souza, John Stossel, Lisa Kennedy, Grover Norquist, Peter Schiff, and many more. Don't miss out. Register at freedomfest.com for $100 off the regular registration rate when you use the all-caps code SHR Media.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is the final segment of the 2-hour Thursday edition, the aftermath, of BZ's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon radio show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening live. Thank you for being in chat. Thank you for listening in podcast. Thank you for listening all around. And despite that, we still have a lot of people in chat, despite the fact that this is a late-ass night show. We have reactionaries. Good to see you. Mike, we got Mary, White Mamba, and one viewer. Don't know who you are, but unlike the federal government or other people that are working against cross purposes, I shall not unmask you. We're talking about the FBI. We were talking about former Director James Comey, and how he can't make an unpoliticized decision. This is the same FBI, I should care to remind you, where former Director James Comey decided to purposely leak classified information to a third party in order to prompt a special counsel to investigate President Trump regarding Russia. What do we know? We also know, because, oh my gosh, this is immured on video with Jason Chaffetz, we also know the FBI itself, under Comey, doesn't obey laws.
5 minutes, and then members will ask questions. Ms. Del Greco, the GAO report asserts that the FBI failed, even though it's directed by law, to put out the privacy impact assessment. Why did the FBI not fulfill the law, the requirement of the law, and why did you not update the privacy impact assessment?
This is a Federal Bureau of Investigation hack. Del Greco in front of Jason Chaffetz trying to justify breaking the law.
You have to put the...
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will defer to DOJ on that.
What do you mean defer to DOJ? You are DOJ, so what do you mean defer?
Isn't that great? No, I don't want to talk about it. It's not comfortable. It's not comfy for me. Just because it's my job doesn't really mean it's my job.
The privacy impact assessment was submitted to the department. I will defer to them for a response.
I'm sorry, we're having a hearing to ask you the questions, and the DOJ...
She's that fucking stupid.
Put you up there. You seem like a very nice person, but you're supposed to be the one to answer that question. What do you mean defer? And
as I've stated, the privacy impact...
Now she gets testy. It's time to get testy because she's being questioned.
Assessment was submitted, and...
Years late, right? Director Howard, you want to comment on this?
Yes, that's correct. It was submitted years after both
years late.
Systems were being used for real-world use.
So here's the problem. You're required by law to put out a privacy statement, and you didn't. And now we're supposed to trust you with hundreds of millions of people's faces in a system that you couldn't protect, even with the 702 issue. You know, we're talking about Mr. Flynn and how he was unmasked and all that, and there can be political gyrations, but set the name aside and Donald Trump and all that. But even in that most stringent circumstance where they're looking at information, somebody decided to take off that veil and release that out to the public. And we're supposed to, and the Office of Personnel Management had tens of millions of federal workers who had information, and some of it included fingerprints and other types of things, and that was stolen and let out, and those people...
Stolen and let out.
People are having to suffer the consequences the rest of their lives. Why should we trust you?
Stop. This goes on for an excruciating 6 more minutes, but I'm running out of time. But the point from Jason Chaffetz was, we can't trust you. You're the FBI. We can't trust you to obey the laws. More and more, it's been proven, no, you can't trust the FBI. If you can't trust the FBI on the federal level, well, who can you trust? What's your backup to the FBI? Chaos? No rule of law. Let's get rid of the Constitution. People in Chicago say, well, we need to defund the Chicago police. It got so stupid that a couple of weeks ago, I wrote an open letter to Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese, who basically said that, you know what, we're not going to obey federal law, so I'm not going to do that. It kind of surrounded, by the way, Portland, Oregon, is in Multnomah County. I should make that clear directly up front. And there's an accused Portland man accused of multiple crimes who was deported 20 times, 20 times.
He was born in Mexico but keeps returning to the U.S. despite 20 deportations.
And now a 31-year-old man faces serious charges after allegedly attacking 2 women in Portland.
Attacking 2 women in Portland, deported 20 times, under the purvey of Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese. I'm naming names and shaming people.
KGW's Pat Doris is live in downtown Portland where the man appeared in court. Pat?
His name's Sergio Martinez. He made a brief appearance back there at the courthouse earlier today. It was only 5 minutes long. He pled not guilty, but yes, these are very serious charges after violent attacks, 2 different women in 2 places here in Northeast Portland.
I'm going to stop that right there because it continues, and I think you probably know the gist of that video. But here's an article from KGW.com. That's the local NBC affiliate right there in Portland, Oregon. The headline goes like this: ICE not alerted when sex assault suspect released from jail in 2016, official says. Portland. A man accused of breaking into a 65-year-old woman's home, sexually assaulting her, and stealing her car was arrested after allegedly assaulting another woman and running from police. According to court documents filed in March 2017, Martinez has a history of illegal entry into the United States. He's been a transient in the Portland area for more than a year and has been deported 20 times. No, that's not a mistake. He was deported 20 times. Okay, and so by whom was he released? The Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, whose sheriff is in charge of the jails in that county, one of 36 in Portland. In Oregon, in all of Oregon. Portland is, like I said, within Multnomah County, and is in fact not only the largest city in Oregon, but the county seat as well. So it's very disappointing to read this. Earlier this year, Multnomah County leaders and Sheriff Mike Reese wrote a letter to the community saying, the sheriff's office does not hold people in county jails on ICE detainers or conduct any immigration enforcement actions. And that story went global too. There was a story by the UK Daily Mail about this, which I'm not going to read. But wait, there's more. 6 months ago, on December 7th, 2016, jail officials in Portland had Martinez in custody when they received a request from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency asking the jail just to notify ICE before his release. So what happened? Yet the local officials released him the next day in defiance of the federal immigration detainer, and agency spokeswoman told the Oregonian. Remember what I said about law enforcement having to step up? This is a point that very few people made. Now, Oregon, oddly enough, has a state law forbidding local law enforcement from using any resources to enforce federal immigration law. That's a law in Oregon from 1987. It's revised statute 181A.820 for those who are looking for me to detail. So this guy was on a tear. He was on a crime spree. He was unabated. And there was another Oregonian female victim to come. So her plight apparently was not quite so dire as the first victim of Martinez, the 20-time ignored potential deportee. And so after all this abomination stuff, I decided that I was going to write a letter to Sheriff Reese. And it went like this. Dear Sheriff Reese, I, like many others, find the recent events involving the processing of Sergio Jose Martinez through your jail both confounding and shocking simultaneously. I would have hoped that you'd been better than that. Instead, I find you in lockstep with some seriously twisted elements in our society, elements political in nature, and truthfully, the most political in nature. Those elements who simply wish to do away with the terms illegal and alien, and for that matter, citizen. Because what is a citizen if not lawful in the eyes of the state itself? Are there true citizens, or are there merely occupants, residents? You're a new sheriff and not an entrenched official. That provides you with some leeway. You seem to, however, have aligned yourself with the wrong elements when you created a recent investigation. And this is from an article from KOIN.com. Headline, Sheriff Reese investigates deputies helping ICE. Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese said Thursday his office is investigating a number of emails showing that his deputies were involved in assisting immigration and customs enforcement agents in their effort to deport illegal immigrants. Now, in a normal world, this would be a normal act. That is to say, an act committed by those wishing to see that justice is served. Today, it's an abnormal act. And this is you, sir, drawing a line. A line that didn't reflect your entire goodwill, but instead reflected your political interests and those of the persons to whom you answer or to whom you believe you answer, separate and disparate. You have an incredible opportunity here. You have the opportunity to set a precedent not unlike that of another sheriff in Texas, Sally Hernandez in Travis County. She showed remarkable heroism, I must admit, for the wrong side. You can weigh in afresh and strong instead, if you choose to. I challenge you, sir, at minimum, pen a letter to the victims, plural, both women, of the illegal alien your department released directly back into the community. I want you to apologize for your actions, and I want you to ensure, both of these women, that your lockstep obedience of injurious and corrosive Oregon laws will end and cooperation will begin to occur between your department and ICE in terms of timely notification for relevant holds and detainers. I challenge you, sir, to further step up to the public podium and take the necessary political stand against so-called sanctuary cities and states, because you are full well cognizant of the deleterious and life-altering consequences of allowing serious, illegal alien criminals to continue abusing Oregon laws originally designed to protect the lawful citizens of your state. Repudiate your most terrible of laws. Take a stand. Sally Hernandez did. You can do no less. Take a stand. Or simply stand by and watch your citizens be scourged by more aliens completely uninvested in your area. They couldn't care less about you. Signed, BZ. That was my letter to him. I have one final question to Sheriff Reese. What are you, anyway? Are you a sheep? Are you a sheepdog? What are you? The only person that can make that decision is you. These decisions are tough. They're tough to make. And there are consequences for doing the right thing. Don't you dare to fucking tell me you don't know what the right thing is and isn't. Some 5-year-olds are sufficiently competent to know what's right and wrong. Apparently you do not. And this all comes back to it's occurring at a time where law enforcement is under the gun, literally and figuratively, more than at any other time. Since, I'd say easily, the 70s. I haven't seen, ambushes are up 167% on cops in the past year. That's just one example. Now, August 21st, right around in there, there were 6 officers shot and 2 killed in 2 hours on one day, just recently. And, of course, leftists, anarchists, Antifa, some Democrats are both publicly or privately, I would suggest, fairly gleeful. Their agendas being served. It's oppressive, racist, badge-heavy cops being served nothing but a heaping helping of their own tyrannical violence. Yes? 6 officers shot and 2 killed in the span of 2 hours in 3 different cities on one day, Friday, August 18th. These are the incidents, just to remind people, recently. 2 officers were shot and killed in Kissimmee, Florida, in what Police Chief Jeff Odell described as an ambush shooting. Officers being shot or killed are up 56%, 167% for ambush killings. They were identified as Officer Matthew Baxter, a 3-year police veteran who is a father of 4 and married to another officer on the force, and Sergeant Richard Sam Haywood, who lived through the night but tragically died the next day on August 19th. That was just in Kissimmee, Florida. It's kind of interesting to note that the suspect in that particular shooting, a guy named Everett Glenn Miller, is a black former Marine known as Malik Muhammad Ali on Facebook, which should come as no shock. That page, well, it's gone now, but it was chock-a-block full of angry rants about Charlottesville, slavery, and racism. So let's use BZ's reversal axiom for a moment, shall we? What would be occurring right now, this very second, had, say, a Caucasoid former Marine shot and killed 2 cops, one of whom was black and the other Hispanic? The racist meme would be played out for days, if not weeks on end. You know it, and I know it. We'd be hearing about it right now. Despite that, the American media maggots totally ignore, and purposely so, the nature of the posts from this guy. The second event. 2 Pennsylvania state troopers were shot in Fairchance, Pennsylvania. Investigators said when the suspect, Clarence Belwa, 26, saw the troopers approaching, he began walking away and ignored commands to stop. When the troopers tried to stop him, Belwa pulled a gun, fired 1 shot, which hit both troopers. They returned fire and killed him. Pennsylvania is lucky, of course, because that suspect was a Caucasoid. No harm, no foul, right? Next. The third incident. 2 officers were also shot in Jacksonville, Florida. On Friday evening, around 10:50 p.m., 2 officers were also shot in Jacksonville, Florida. The Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Department tweeted, 2 police officers shot west side of East Jacksonville. Police said in a news briefing the officers were shot with a high-powered rifle through a door when they arrived at a scene. The suspect, Brabham, was black. It's how he identified himself. The suspect had no criminal history, police said. However, there is a photo that appears to be a suspect holding a gun on a MySpace page that bears his name. Oh, yeah. And there's this. On Facebook, a page in Brabham's name showed despair about many things, including Charlottesville and racism. A relative who identified herself as his aunt shared multiple of Brabham's posts from the page on August 19th. She also wrote, "A young man I know is no longer here. His whole family is saddened by his death." My question today is this. Are you ready? One of the posts she shared from the page said, "If you're voting for Donald J. Trump, you're either partisan, racist, stupid, or not paying attention. If you feel differently, please let me know why in the comments, and please don't say no stupid shit like he will make America great again." And then a gun battle ensued. We're talking about a gun battle within about 4 or 5 feet of each other. The suspect fired at the officers. 2 officers were struck, and the suspect in the exchange was struck twice. Of course, you hear about that by the American media maggots. No, of course you haven't. It's their standard slandered mindfuck of all. Then we have this that no one heard about. I've just got a few minutes left. But I'm going to tell you about this because you need to hear about this too. This is the state of how we consider our law enforcement officers around the nation. Here's an article from BlueLivesMatter.com. Headline: Vanderbilt Clinic nurse refused to help critically injured Robertson County deputy sheriff. Critically injured, you may think? Oh, maybe he broke his arm? No. He got shot. A firestorm has been created by the apparent refusal of a Vanderbilt nurse practitioner to treat a badly wounded Robertson County deputy sheriff. The incident occurred on June 28th at the 100 Oaks Vanderbilt Clinic. According to WKRN, Robertson County Sheriff Josh Wiley was at the clinic with federal prisoner Rodney Cole, who had a medical condition that required frequent follow-ups at the clinic. Cole told Deputy Wiley he had to go to the bathroom. The deputy escorted him to the bathroom, and a short time later, Deputy Wiley's partner said that she heard Deputy Wiley yelling her name from the bathroom. She ran inside only to find Cole on top of Deputy Wiley, stabbing him repeatedly with a screwdriver. Metro Police said Deputy Jones fired at Cole, and he attacked her, trying to get to her firearm. Deputy Jones later told investigators that Cole briefly had a weapon during the struggle, which continued into the hall. Deputy Wiley then exchanged gunfire with Cole, despite being seriously wounded. Both Cole and Deputy Wiley were shot. Oh, and he was stabbed with a screwdriver, too. Don't forget that. Berry Hill Police reports that it was later determined Deputy Wiley had been shot 7 times and lay bleeding on the floor. Berry Hill Police officers responded to assist, first on the scene, followed by other officers. They found him on the floor, critically injured, and Cole on the floor. They said a nurse practitioner who was not identified came into the examining room, declared Cole dead, and left the room without providing any assistance to Deputy Wiley. Yesterday, a deputy that I once supervised, Bob French, was killed by gunfire from a second-story position of advantage with a long gun as Deputy French was holding a perimeter. This suspect had just fired a long gun, a rifle, through the doors, just like we heard before in the prior story, and shot 2 CHP officers. I'm told they'll both be fine. Robert French was 52. He had an ex-wife. He had a girlfriend. He had children. He had grandchildren. He'd been on the department for 21 years. There were pursuits. There were other people involved. And the last deputy sheriff killed on my department was also another person that I supervised, Danny Oliver. So you wonder where I'm going with this? This can't continue. It's untenable. Not if we don't want chaos to absolutely reign. Law enforcement has to stop being politicized, and they have to be allowed to continue to do their jobs. Folks, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bpbcat Saloon on the SHR Media Network. You want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at bzep, on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net, and in my email, bz@shrmedia.com. You have a good weekend. God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Folks that I know, tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again. Don't know when, don't know when, but I know we'll meet.
Quiet down now and get some sleep.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.